It is my tremendous honor to introduce somebody who is very special. Her Excellency Joyce Banda grew up on African soil to become the first woman president of Malawi and only the second woman in Africa to serve as head of state. Serving in that role from 2012 to 2014, she achieved many accomplishments. Turning around an ailing economy, which was on the verge of collapse when she took office, repealing a number of laws that weakened essential democratic institutions, infringed upon civil liberties, and restricted the freedom of press, launching the Presidential Initiative on Maternal Health and Safe Motherhood, an initiative that ultimately has seen significant decreases in maternal mortality. But I have to say that she has a very long bio with many accolades, but in reviewing her time in office, I came across a single act that I felt was emblematic of her commitment to social justice and to her people. As one of her first actions after taking office, President Banda sold the multi-million-dollar presidential jet and donated 30% of her salary to the Malawi Council for the Handicap, an organization that serves individuals with disabilities. Talk about dreaming big, thinking big, and showing it not only in words but in action. She is the founder of the Joyce Banda Foundation. She sits on many boards, is recipients of many awards, including the World Food Prize. In 2013 and 2014, Forbes named her one of the world's most powerful Black women. In 2014, she made the list of the world's 100 most influential people by Time Magazine and Forbes. And also in 2014, CNN named her one of the most inspirational women in politics. Finally, earlier this year, she co-authored a book called From Day One, Why Supporting Girls Aged 0 to 10 is Critical to Changing Africa's Path. Because of her commitment to advancing the girl child is notable and never ending. Today, we are honored that she's here to speak with us at Results International Conference. We welcome her. Your Excellency, will you please join us at the podium?
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's very encouraging. How proud I feel to be among fellow champions. It's so pleasing for me to be here. And I don't know how many people in the room have been heads of state, but it is good to come and just be free, without guns and security. As has already been said in the introduction, I've spent all my adult life trying to do something about the situation of women and girls. But now we have the SDG 1, poverty elimination. We are racing towards 2030. Shall we eradicate poverty by 2030? I'm asking fellow champions.
Yes!
Are we winning? And if we are not, where are the gaps? And what do we need to do? In Africa, the face of poverty are women and girls, which means for me, and advocating once again here, we need to focus on women and girls if we are going to win by 2030. Most of the issues that I have championed in my life have originated from personal experience. So I consider myself very fortunate. But these experiences have also pushed me to ask very serious questions. So allow me to share some of those questions and also to share with you stories. I'm an African grandmother, so we are storytellers. Why is it that women and girls in the developing world eat last and least? Why is it that in our traditions, where I come from, men eat first and best and most? At the level that I am, my husband has served as Chief Justice of 2 countries. And I have been my country's Member of Parliament, Minister of Women and Children, Foreign Minister, Vice President, and President of my country. The other day, there was 1 egg remaining in the house. So the cook fries the egg and brings it to the table and places it in front of my husband. And that happens a lot. And I asked, where is my egg? And he said, no, there was only 1 remaining. And then I said, how did you decide who should have it? Because I'm younger than him. The other question is, why is it that when resources are low at household level, why is it that boys are going to school and girls are not? Why are 130 million women around the world out of school? I was born in a matrilineal system of marriage, which means my grandmother was supposed to give me her name. And when she dies, I become the matriarch of the family. But tradition also requires that she brings me up. So my mother was supposed to hand me over to her. Both things did not happen in my life, because I was born in this little clinic where this European nurse had come to set up a clinic. And the next day going around, finds my grandmother carrying this baby, asked, what is the name of this baby going to be? And my grandmother, instead of saying, what did she say? Just tell her she will take my name because that's what it's supposed to be. She said, ask her what her name is. And this woman says, she says her name is Joyce. She says, yeah, that's the name of this child. When this baby grows up, she's going to do wonderful things in this country. She'll be a very important woman. So she denied me, deprived me, my right to inherit her name and her position in the family, to become the matriarch of the family. But I thank God that I have indeed built 15 clinics in my country. And the reason why she did not bring me up is because my father was working in the police, and so it was 15 kilometers away. My grandmother tried to argue that it was her right to bring me up. In the end, they compromised and agreed that 1 week, Monday to Friday, I would stay in town, and the weekend I would go home to be with my grandmother. And every Friday, my father gave me 1 shilling and 6 pence, and whenever I went home, I would find my friend Chris by the roadside waiting for me without fail. And we would walk into the village together, and she taught me all about village life. I was growing up in town. She was growing up in the village. She went to the village school. She was the best student every class. So she was brighter than me because I wasn't first student, first position every class. We got to the end of primary school. We were both selected the best secondary schools in Malawi. I went one term, I came back, Chris was not by the roadside. I asked my grandmother said, I don't think she'll be coming to see you again. She's very angry right now. She dropped out of school because the family couldn't raise the $6 she required to go back. So as I'm talking to you now, Chris is still where I left her. And I went on and went all the way to State House. So the question I asked at 14, for the first time I woke up to the injustice of this world. Why must Chris not go back to school through no fault of her own? And why must I go? And go on all the way to State House? For the longest time, she didn't want to talk to me. Because at 15 years, she got married, and the baby that she got at that time died a year ago. So Chris has lost out, all round. But as we went on, later on, while I was in State House, I invited her to State House. I said, you haven't gone to school? I have gone to school, but we can both become champions for poor girls in our society. So in 2013, I brought her to New York, and she met Bill Clinton. And I told her that we are going to meet Gordon Brown, who is the envoy for UN for education for girls. She said, but I can't speak English. I said, it doesn't matter. You are my fellow champion. And the next day, I didn't realize, I told her I would bring her, pick her up from the hotel, and I was a whole president of a country. I get there, she had gone into some shop, bought herself a big wig and a suit, and I mean, I said, you look like a scarecrow. Did you need to do this? She said, I didn't want to embarrass you. As I'm talking to you now, I have built 3 schools in Malawi, and I've sent 6,500 girls to school on her behalf. And Chris has become a champion for education because we run one of the only 3 free secondary schools in the country, and Chris is a board member now. And she's the one who goes around looking for desperate girls that want to go to school. And she's a board member. She goes about with her Ford. I don't know what she's reading there, but she's a board member. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, why must women die giving birth? I have read the Bible. There's nowhere where it says we shall die giving life. And yet, where I come from, when I had my 4th born child in 1984, 1,200 women were dying giving life. And I didn't know this. So I went into hospital to have a baby, and I suffered what they call postpartum hemorrhage. And I was bleeding to death. And that's the highest cause of death for pregnant women where I come from. And then I woke up. My husband went and found one of the only 3 gynecologists we had in the country who was a good friend of his. He came and saved my life. And for the 2 days I stayed in hospital, everybody kept saying, how come you're still alive? Because when you start bleeding, they expect that you're going to die. And I started to ask questions. And I started to look around. And that's how I bumped into this statistic that said 1,200 women were dying. By the time I became head of state, 675 women were dying per 100,000. And for me, that's not acceptable. But during the time that I was there, we were able to reduce that death by 30%. So I know that it can be done. My daughter, when she was 10 years old, I told her, I almost died giving life to you. And she told me, Mom, if that's the case, I'm going to be a doctor. And she's a medical doctor now. What are we missing, and what is it that we can do together? Allow me to speak like an African woman. On behalf of all African women, and I would like to thank all of you for all the work that you're doing around the world on our behalf. I'm of the view that what Africa needs is a critical mass of women leaders. Because I've been there, so I know. Right now, last year in June, we formed what we are calling the African Women Leaders Network. And on the steering committee, I'm serving on the steering committee. And I was pleasantly surprised that they asked me to head the sector that looks after women in the rural areas, which is my favorite place. And I feel that we need to make an effort to make sure that women are participating in leadership. I have been in State House, and I know the power of this pen when you are a leader. By a stroke of a pen, you can appoint fellow women to positions of leadership. But by the stroke of a pen, you can start initiatives like the ones that were being mentioned in the introduction. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, but I've also been fortunate. I want you to know that where I come from, there are so many Joyce Bandas. There's already a Malawian here who is doing commendable work in Malawi. There are so many Joyce Bandas. So what you can do as advocates is to ensure that you are supporting us to get the support that we require as indigenous NGOs and local NGOs, to put together the issues that affect us, because we have articulated them. We're not just sitting back waiting for handouts. But if also we are ignored and international NGOs come, then we are losing out, because we know what needs to change. But we need your support to work together with us in order to have better results. I have been very fortunate because I always call myself a product of USAID. Because it was in 1989 that I first met Don Henry at a meeting. In Malawi, during the time when there was a dictatorship and you just didn't talk, you didn't open your mouth, you ended up in jail, and I stood up in a meeting that had been organized by UNDP and said, if this country ignores women, the private sector shall never thrive, shall never grow, and we shall never, the private sector in this country shall never be the engine for growth. And at break time, an American gentleman by the name of Don Henry walked over to me and said, are you not worried about your life and yourself? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, here is my card. If you ever need me in the future, I'll be there to assist you. So I have had the opportunity to work with USAID in Malawi. I mobilized 50,000 women, and the financial support came from USAID. I went to Grameen Bank and trained to develop and to design our own model for microfinance, and I was funded by USAID. I've just finished a fellowship here in the US at the Woodrow Wilson Center, and it was funded by USAID. And I've just written a book on the girl child. I'm saying that I have reached 1.3 million Malawians in my country under the Joyce Banda Foundation. But this would not have been possible if the American government did not support me. Even when I became head of state, it took 3 days for the people to accept in Malawi that I could take oath and become head of state when the president died. When we had been elected together and the constitution was very clear that I should be the next president. It took the American ambassador to intervene, and the army commander in Malawi to intervene, and the General Richard Myers of the US to intervene. Don't underrate your role on the global stage. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I was looking at maternal mortality. Every day, 830 women die giving life. 99% of all maternal deaths occur in developing countries. Maternal mortality is higher in women living in rural areas and among the poor communities. Young adolescents face a higher risk of complications and death as a result of pregnancy than other women. Skilled care before, during, and after childbirth can save the lives of women and newborn babies. Between 1990 and 2015, maternal mortality worldwide dropped by about 44%. But I don't think those of us in Africa and the developing world can say the same. The question I have asked is, why is it that here when women are pregnant, it's a time of joy and expectation? They begin to shop around. They even know the sex of the baby. Where I come from, it's a time of anxiety. I walked into this one clinic one time, and the woman looked at me, the only one baby that had been born that night. So this mother was there alone in tears. And I said, where's the baby? She said, I don't have a baby. My baby died last night as we gave birth. I was supposed to bring a candle to deliver in the night using my own candle, and I didn't have the 5 cents to buy the candle. So we were literally giving birth in the dark and strangled the baby. In the civilized world, they would be rushing to court. Where I come from, that's it. You go and start all over again. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I feel that in order for us to have leadership in Africa, women leaders, in my research, I found that leaders are born. There was a lot of argument back and forth, but if you Google, you will find that indeed leaders are born with 30% leadership traits. 70% has to be added on. This girl has to be mentored, this girl has to be protected, this girl child has to go to school. That's the 70%. This child has to go to university. So I am focusing on the girl child in a typical rural area where going to school is not even an option. There's no opportunity. But this girl child has been born with 30% leadership traits. What do we do? How do we identify this girl child? What do we do to community to make sure that their mindset changes and they value the girl child just like the boy child at household level? So I decided to come and look closely at women's leadership. How can we increase the number of women leaders on the continent? It was while I was at Woodrow Wilson Center, researching on women's leadership, that my mind went racing to the girl child. If indeed we are born leaders with 30% leadership traits, I knew at 8 years old that I was going to be a leader. Somebody was telling my father. My father laughed. What do you mean she will do something great in this country? He said, I don't know, but I just feel that way. So I've always known. My father, fortunately, for many years, kept telling me, remember what my friend told you. But imagine this girl child in a household where she is born and she is eating last and least with mother, because the son is eating with father. So nutrition-wise, she's being deprived. And then at 5 years old, I have a bad back myself, because we start carrying heavy stuff at 5 years old. And then at 6, 7, the girl child is defiled, because somebody has told this man to say, if you defile a young 5, 6-year-old, you cleanse yourself of the virus. At 9 years old, she's initiated. It was on BBC that in some traditions, a man is given to a small girl between 8 and 10 to sleep with this poor child. And then if it is in Kenya, then it is mutilation. If it is in Cameroon, it may be breast ironing. This girl child between 0 and 10 is going through all this. What are the chances of even the 30% turning into anything worth talking about? So my appeal here today is that the world and us as advocates have earmarked a lot of resources for the adolescent girl child, age 11 to 19. And my argument, if you read my book, my argument is that by that time, it's too late. So tonight, this afternoon, I hope I can recruit a lot of people in here who will join me in this crusade to say it's not the adolescent girl child, it is the child between 0 and 10, the girl child. Between the ages of 0 and 10, you either capture this leader or you lose her. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am calling upon all of you to read my book, so I don't want to go into the details to preempt it because I'm launching it on Monday. But that's where I'm discussing what I feel are the solutions. What is it that we need to do, even at government level? But I also wanted to draw your attention to the fact that even those of us who have made it into leadership, women's leadership is under attack globally. You can go from Julia Gillard in Australia all the way to Dilma in Brazil. Welcome. Just go country by country where a president has been. We agreed in Beijing in 1995 that we shall go home and assume positions of leadership, particularly elected office. And I remember us asking the leader who was talking to us to say, but they are already sitting there, men are already sitting in those seats. They said, go and push them if you have to. But go back home and become leaders. And we did. And we went home. And we went home and we found our way to State House. And Africa did very well because 4 women ended up in State House. Liberia, Joyce Banda of Malawi, Catherine Panza of Central African Republic, and President Fak of Mauritius. If you go back and check, all of them are out. And if you go globally, you find that all the figures are going down every day. We agreed to get into leadership, but we didn't discuss how to stay there. And I think that's what should be the challenge now. What is it that we can do? Women are being stripped naked just trying to stand for political office. Women are being abused. Women are being discouraged from standing for office because of smear campaigns, unnecessary smear campaigns. If you look at all the women that are pushed out of office, without fail, there will be a legal issue. Because they say when they drag you to court, then you can't stand for elections again. Why is it that we have become a problem? Because, with all due respect to my gentlemen in the room, women make better leaders. Women focus more on issues that affect social issues, that affect the life at household. I have been away from home for 4 years, and I went back 2-3 months ago, surprisingly to a hero's welcome. Because, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I learned very early that leadership is a love affair. You must fall in love with the people you serve, and the people fall in love with you. And when that happens, even when somebody rigs an election, they will never rig the mind. And even if somebody abuses your smear campaigns, the people shall stand with you because they know exactly who you are. So we have to find a way of increasing the number of women and of women leaders on the continent of Africa and in the developing world, if we are going to tackle the issues we are talking about here. But as far as I'm concerned, it starts at household level. Statistics are there. Malala has even said it this week, that if we want women countries to develop, women must participate in leadership. But the girls must go to school first in order for them to become the leaders that we want. In any case, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we need to achieve gender equality. We need to forge smart partnerships between advocates here, NGOs here, and NGOs in Africa. We need to ensure that, I can give you examples. Right now, the Joyce Banda Foundation in Malawi feeds 15,000 children. But the food that we provide to the children is donated by Nuskin of Utah here in the US. So forging smart partnerships, realizing that they can't go and feed all those children, but there are agents there like ourselves who can bring about change and feed the children. There's a girl of 15 years old in New York who contacted me and said, you are my role model, and she's an American girl. She's not even a black girl. She said, I want you to assist me to reach out and do something in Africa. Thousands and thousands. I was with Liz in Malawi when I arrived back in April, and she saw thousands of girls in school uniform because she has been donating money for those children to have uniform, because if they don't have uniform and they are in tattered clothes, they don't go to school. So these are things that don't mean much here, but that mean a lot there. A 13-year-old girl who is living in South Carolina with her mother went home with her mother and found that girls were bringing to school books in plastic bags. She asked her mother. The mother said they don't have backpacks. Really? She came back, told her teacher in South Carolina. They helped her mobilize 50 bags. She went back, gave those to her village. This past year, she distributed 10,000 bags to 35 countries. An organization called Rudeman Foundation invited me to speak in Boston a few months ago, and they gave me a speaking fee of $20,000. And I gave to my office, and I said, mobilize girls with disability to go to school. So we are training 20 students in our medical school, but we are also training 15 girls with disability to go to secondary school. So those are the kind of smart partnerships that we can forge and work together. We know the issues there. You have the resources. You have the expertise. Together, we can achieve more. But I would like to end by saying that it is very important for us to pay attention to the fact that women are in majority in this world. And the last time I checked, they brought into this world the other half. Thank you very much.
Not a tough act to follow. As we transition now into our exciting panel for this plenary session, I am going to invite one by one, as I introduce them, our distinguished panelists to come up and join us. So first, let me introduce them. Kristin Rowe-Finkbeiner is the Executive Director and CEO and co-founder of Mums Rising and board president of the Mums Rising Education Fund. It's an organization that I'm sure many of you in this room know, that she helped seed and has now become an on-the-ground and online grassroots organization of more than 1 million people who are working to achieve economic security for moms, women, and families throughout the U.S., and I think internationally as well. Her most recent book, come on up, Kristin, this one, Keep Marching, How Every Woman Can Take Action and Change Our World, is this one. Join us. Welcome. Thank you. Julie Essiam is the president of Africans for Africa and was formerly the chief executive officer of the EcoBank Foundation. Africans for Africa is an all-African-driven social impact investment fund intended to generate investments that will accelerate the pace of sustainable development with a focus on health, education, and economic inclusion. Its vision is to enable the prosperity of Africans from all walks of life in our lifetime. Julie, welcome. And Katja Iversen, an old friend, is the president and CEO of Women Deliver. She is a leading global advocate for investment in gender equality and the health, rights, and well-being of girls and women. She has more than 25 years of experience working in NGOs, corporations, UN agencies, including serving in leadership roles at UNICEF and UNFPA. She's a highly effective advocate who is comfortable in villages working alongside youth advocates in rural Africa as sitting at G7 tables with presidents and prime ministers, all in a bid to drive for progress. Come on up, Katja, my friend. There we go. Oh, I forgot I've got a mic on somewhere. Good. All right, so this is going to be an interesting conversation, and we are going to then turn it over to you to ask some interesting questions, because we know that results volunteers are shy and quiet, don't ask any tough questions, but be prepared for that, you know, build up your courage. That will be coming. Hello, my fellow colleagues, women of action. So just to begin with, just a general question to the group, and maybe just, you know, starting with you, Katja, to respond to this. This feels like it's an important moment in history. The mantra, poverty is sexist, seems to finally becoming mainstream, gaining some traction beyond a small subset of very specific gender-focused development professionals and grabbing a bigger share of public interest. As women on the front line of change, in many ways driving change, what have been some big moments for you personally as you've been witness to this progress? And how can we tap into it? How can we really seize this opportunity and really make it meaningful? Katja?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for inviting. I must say this opening and the discussion about oppression and the value discussion, and the results that you have achieved, I'm so in awe. So if I should kind of pick great moments, this will be one of them. But else I'd say it's very difficult to choose whether it's when I'm sitting with women in the villages in Malawi or in Senegal or in Kenya or across the globe, or when I'm sitting at some of those so-called power tables. But I thought for the fun of it, I'd share one of the power tables. So I was fortunate enough to be appointed to Prime Minister Trudeau's G7 Gender Council. You know, kind of I looked a little bit around. There was Malala and Melinda Gates and me and Christine Lagarde, and I kind of, okay, I can do that. I'm sure I can. You know, that was the shaky legs that we spoke about before. So I got to hang out with this wonderful lady when she brought in 6 amazing youth advocates to the Ministers of Finance and Minister of Development meeting in Whistler a month and a half ago. And they kicked off that meeting with the really big wigs in the most profound, down-to-earth, this is my life and you gotta listen way that I can just imagine is what results advocates and activists does. But that set the tone for the whole meeting, and that was amazing. Fast forward 5 days later, I got to sit at the table with the principals, with the heads of states. And I was kind of pointed by the other council members to actually present on our behalf. And I got all the good stuff about sexual reproductive health and rights and violence and harassment, and there was President Trump, and kind of, they were all there. And I must say, it was amazing to see what has happened since I started in the gender equality and women's health world, because they spent 2 hours of their very limited and slightly abrupted time at the G7 to discuss gender equality. Yes, somebody were late, but if President Trump had not been late, we would not have gotten a front page on the New York Times. But that discussion, the following discussion where they really bought in and where later in the day kind of stepped up and said $3.8 billion to girls' education, I must say that was a true moment where we could use all the evidence that we have gathered together, all the activism that we've seen over years and sometimes get tired to really see come to fruition.
Julie, just how do you feel we can best seize this opportunity? What have been some of the moments that make you feel inspired?
Let me just say how amazing you guys are. I just want to carry all of you and take you back home to Africa to model this amazing advocacy. You can hear me. You can hear me now. This is just so amazing, and congratulations, and I hope that there's a way that we can model this back home, because advocacy, advocacy, advocacy is the only way that we're going to unlock those closed minds. So the work that you're doing, just give a round of applause for yourselves. This is too powerful. This is really, really amazing. Thank you. Thank you. I think, and I'm going to take this question from a private sector standpoint. Sure. I've been blessed to have a good career in some ways because I've done the private sector, and in the private sector I did business, and then I moved into human resources, and I used to work for Citibank here for a long time in the US, and then moved back to Africa. And I've also done philanthropic work, and I've managed a foundation. So I've done the 360. And I was involved with a study with McKinsey Consulting on women matters a couple of years ago. I think it was 2015. And that was an eye-opener. We have been, from my HR work and also from foundation, we've been trodden and trying to make some impact. We did some work with the UN, trying to make some impact and make some changes in that space. But the results of the survey that McKinsey did and McKinsey presented showed very clearly that there has been some progress, specifically in the private sector. But if we don't sit up, there's a significant risk of actually going back on the small progress that we've made. I want to call it small because I think we can do a lot more, but there has been progress. There's been CEOs who are now sitting up, and it's public knowledge, so I can name a couple: Essentia, BLP, Billiton CEOs, who've actually set up and incorporated gender diversity and executive women's programs in their strategy. Because bottom line is they've realized that it makes business sense. Their financials are going up. This is not a nice thing to do. I'm from the private sector. I don't want to say this is a human thing to do. This makes business sense. This makes economic sense. Prosperity for any society, for any economy. If the women base are not captured, sorry, especially from where I'm from. Locally, so that study was an eye-opener, that we've made progress, but there's that risk of actually going back. But that study also showed us that advocacy is what is going to unlock this space. The whining in their ears, and the nya and the nagging to the CEOs, it takes a long time. It takes emotions and it takes a lot of work. But that is what, putting them on the stage and calling them to action, is what is actually changing some of the minds. The McKinsey has also shown, the research says that about 15% of companies whose financials went up in their industry had the most senior executive women in their companies. So the statistics are very, very clear. That study actually made me sit up and say we're on the right track. But that study also made me sit up and say to myself that we're not there yet, and if we relax a little bit, we're going to go back again. Because the same study also showed that from between 2015 to 2016, there's only been a 1% increase, and for 6 years, there's only been about 6% increase in over 13 years. So as much as we're actually celebrating that there's been an increase, it's not that big, but the leaders of these organizations need to sit up. So that was sort of like my aha moment. And then when you see organizations in Australia, sort of societal organizations in Australia, such as, I think it's the men champions, also standing up and putting their foot and their mouth forward and saying, we need to make a change, because it does make sense, it does make economic sense for our societies. This is what really, sort of at the end of the day, makes it all worth it.
That's great. Kristin, do you have an answer to the same question?
Yes, and I want to share the other panelists' awe of your power and of the gorgeous group of people that are in this room here today to save our nation and to save our world. So I want to thank you for having me, and thank you for being here. So, I won't lie, when Donald Trump won the presidency, I was a little down. I was actually a lot down. I was standing in New York City at Hillary Clinton's event in a giant room bigger than this one that had a solid glass ceiling above it. And as state after state election returns came in, there were no cracks in the glass ceiling. 0. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've been organizing since I was 19 years old. I've been working in politics. I've been fighting for justice since I was very young. And this moment in time, it might be the end. But what happened is the cracks happened anyway. Women rose up, and the largest marches in the history of our country happened just the day after inauguration. And importantly, despite the fact that there was opposition to health care in the U.S. House leadership, in the U.S. Senate leadership, and certainly in the Oval Office, the women of America, through their calls, through their letters, through their sharing their stories, through their reaching out to other women in their communities, through speaking up, saved health care for 30 million people, not once, but twice. That was nothing short of a political miracle. And there was analysis that was done, and they said, who are making these calls? Who is taking action? And who is making the calls and who is taking action is over 80% women. We are a powerful political force. We are an incredibly powerful economic force. I love what you said. In the United States of America, our GDP right now is 72% based on consumer spending, and guess who is making more than 80% of those consumer decisions? Women and moms. We have so much untapped power. And when we succeed, our nation succeeds. When we succeed, our world succeeds. And we know that we are more powerful than we think. Now, people say, what is the rule for winning? How can we win? And I have to say, the first rule for winning is to believe in ourselves, to believe in our power, to listen to our voice and the voices of our sisters, our mothers, our community, and to lift each other's voices, not just our own. And as we do that, miracles happen. Just in the past 2 weeks, over 70,000 Moms Rising members raised their voices to help protect SNAP, food stamps. In the United States of America, 1 in 4 children are living in food scarcity households. 1 in 4 children. And we had, again, the Oval Office, the leadership in the House, and the leadership in the Senate trying to cut food stamps. Well, women rose up in Moms Rising and many organizations and said, no way, no how, not on our watch. And once again, we won against all odds. So I am so thankful to be here with you. I believe in you. I believe in us. And I know right before this meeting that we had coming together, I had to go visit the White House. And I had to go shake my fist at it and wig my finger at it, and I had to say, we are coming for you, White House. We are coming for you. We are registering people to vote. We are taking action. We're making those calls. We're calling our friends. We're making sure everybody we know is registered to vote, because we will not sit down until we know that the person who is sitting in that Oval Office respects the contributions, the needs, and the dignity of every single woman, child, and person in the United States of America. Because not only do I believe in us, I believe in the promise of our nation and of what we can achieve together. So I thank you for having me, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts too. Thank you.
Thank you. Relentless, I love this drive for relentless advocacy. A little people in this room, you know, if you've ever tried to sleep with one mosquito buzzing around your ear and how hard it is, imagine a swarm.
Yes.
So we'll be the swarm buzzing in their ear. Joyce, I wanted to just talking about the power of politics and the power of women leaders, obviously, and the force of women leaders in politics. You are a force. But also I'm interested in just your perspective on elevating, supporting from grassroots to global, particularly maybe even with the example of the African Women Leaders Network that you've established, a little bit more about sort of helping to support and empower other women to claim that authority, to claim that a political voice.
Yeah, thank you. The African Women Leaders Network was formed last year, June. And what we have found is that it has helped bring up another cadre of leaders, the younger age. And I think what is critical right now is those of us who have made it to make sure that we are creating room at the table for younger leaders and to play our role in supporting them and empowering them to become the leaders that they should be. I have been amazed myself at how young African leaders begin to show their power of activism and advocacy. In Malawi, during the time we were advocating for the passing of the minimum age, marriage age, which is now 18, that law was passed. It was a 13-year-old girl. It was, a 15-year-old girl who mobilized her fellow girls and camped at Parliament. And thanks to the men that have come out and are working with us side by side, realizing that we can only achieve a lot if we work together, men and women. They camped together at Parliament until that law was passed. And so at this African Women Leaders Network, we have made it, it is a must for somebody like me. In fact, now we are sending about 10 girls to school, but these girls were identified by a younger leader who felt compelled to mobilize her fellow girls in the village who are not going to school and brought them over to me. So finding ways of working together to make sure that one, we raise our voices in advocacy, but two, to actually do something about the situation. We have spoken enough, we have talked enough, and encouraging women and men to talk to one another, because we've been talking to ourselves for too long. And then we don't benefit anything. We have a women's meeting, we yell and we moan and we scream, and then we go. But when in Africa, it's important to bring the men to the table as well, because they are the ones who can assist you to do something about the situation.
Thank you. Katja, just moving, you know, from big P politics to small P politics, everything in between. You've literally written a book, not unlike Kristin, written a book that you've just released. I'm going to say it in Danish. Kvind kent dit netværk.
Wow.
English translation, Women Know Your Network, right? And the power to ensure that women are driving change from inside and they are getting to the right tables. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe talk also about Women Deliver as a movement, Women Deliver as a conference, Women Deliver as this.
Yes. So for those of you who don't know Women Deliver, as we say a little polemically, women deliver and a lot more than babies. And they deliver everything. So Women Deliver, we're an advocacy organization. We advocate for the health rights and well-being of girls and women and gender equality at large. We drive investment, and that's both political and financial investment in girls and women. And we work with thousands and thousands and thousands of organizations, like Results, like Mom Rising, with the private sector, with the UN, everybody who want to push. We started with the investment case back when that was very unpopular. we worked with McKinsey, back then there was one number, and that was that we lost $15 billion a year letting women die in childbirth. That was the only number that was in that whole horizon. Today we know a lot more. So we advocate, we get the evidence, we do it open source, so we get evidence, all the proven evidence, solutions, actions, what works, and then we let people run with it, let them take it. We get into those places where we can advise. Yesterday I was sitting with A1, I'm on the Unilever Council, kind of a lot of the private sector because they have to move as well, with the UN, with civil society, and then we lift up voices of girls and women from across the globe because that is, so it's head, it's hearts, and it's hands to take the action. When it comes to networking, I want to say women are not always good at helping other women. And as there's a very good woman who says, there's a place in hell for women who don't help other women. Because we are just not good enough at it. Maybe because there's scarcity of spaces in the echelon for us, so we think we should compete. My mantra is we get much further if we help and if we lift each other up and work with men to do that. The Women Deliver Conference is the largest conference in the world on gender equality.
Changed my life.
In 323 days, we will gather 6,000 to 7,000 people in Vancouver, plus 100,000 across the globe in 160 countries. Hope many of you will be there. Everything is focused on solutions. It's an energizer, it's a fueling station of solution, energy, new partnerships and new ways of doing things, and it's only focused on advocacy. So that's some of the fueling stations on how to change the world.
I love that, fueling stations on how to change the world. To get some more fuel to kind of energize the tanks of the people in this room. Julie, you've spoken a bit about your connection and your move to your work with private sector, and really affecting change in the world will take everybody, right? Results volunteers have typically not directed their advocacy at private sector. They've traditionally directed their advocacy at governments, and I'm curious, how can we inspire, how can we get private sector leaders to have more impact on the issues that results advocates and you obviously care about? You talked a bit about this, but maybe you could explore it a bit more. And what has your path been from private sector to development? That's what he taught you about sort of the relevant things that we need to know about that space.
Yeah, I think the private sector, I believe that the private sector has an imperative, key role to play in social transformation. If we're going to win the space for impact and for sustainability, otherwise we'll keep spinning our wheels. We cannot afford not to bring the private sector in. I think there's a level of mindset shift that we need to all engage in. Typically, we go to the private sector for funding, and then that is the end of the story. There's more, and then we use the funds, and then we go back again. There's donor fatigue. They no longer want to know. It's too much now. So how can we bring them to the table to have a discussion with us, to lead us, to show us how to operate in a very optimal way so that we drive impact and drive sustainability? They have what it takes. Private sector may not make profit this year, or they may lose a little bit of money this year, but they are structured and set up with an operating model for success. We're also set up for success, but I think we spin our wheels a little bit. Our structures is a bit different, right? They have the marketing tools, they have the efficiency structures, cost optimization structures. So it goes beyond just going to them for funding. But even around funding, they can show us how to create innovative financing mechanisms to actually have to optimize the money that they give us so that we don't keep going back to them all the time. If I give you $10, or if they give me $10, I'll use $8, I'll invest $8, use $2 to do my work now, and then the returns on the $8 I'll keep using, so that if I go back, I don't go back next year, but I go back in maybe 5 or 6 years. That is a better model than keep going back on, and then they throw little bonus at us, right? Little money, here you go, sort of to make them feel better. We need to now drive advocacy in the private sector. I think there's a lot of noise now. I was also able to sit at the AU presentation last year, and there's a lot of noise from the public sector that the private sector needs to partner with them. We cannot, at least I'm speaking for Africa, right? We cannot leave this to the public sector. The structures are not there for success. The private sector needs to form public-private partnerships. If you look at health, education, and economic inclusion, on the health side, investing in frontline health for access to health, to bring health closer to the rural areas. I love some of the stories that you were saying. The baby wouldn't have died if we had invested in community health workers. In education, how do we create and build effective and competitive education systems so that we don't have a brain drain? I was educated at Carnegie Mellon. I lived here for 18 years and served the United States. I just went back home. Perhaps maybe I could have gone back home earlier, right? But the structures were not set up for me to have the kind of job or an employment that would actually challenge me. So there's a lot that they can do, and I think now the realization is coming. I would really come in here, the first thing I said to myself, I'm going to go there because they need to start lobbying the private sector. The government, it's enough now. Please, let's go to the private sector. Let's make some noise. Let's shout in their ears. They have a moral obligation, even if we don't, maybe let's put the commercial on the side. The communities that they derive their commercial gains from are the same communities that are on the bottom of the pyramid. I will name some companies. If you look at Nestle, Unilever, Google, Facebook, etc., the money, most of their profit is coming from the people from the lowest of the pyramid. And those are the people who are dying in the rural areas who don't have health, who don't have strong education systems, who are preventing girls from going to school. So all these issues, they can help us. But I think when we go to them, and I've sat on the other side, and I've seen us come and have discussions with emotions, it doesn't work, right? There's a business case. They can teach us how to come to the table with a business value proposition so that they can incorporate that into their business model. That we don't do. We sort of bring emotions into the conversations, and we're just going to spin our wheels. Every year, we're going to do the same work over and over again, and sustainability and impact is what we're losing right now because the work is being done.
Thank you. That gives us something to think about. I'm putting the audience on order that I'm going to ask just a couple more questions, and then so start jotting down your notes, letting your heart race a little, so you can go to the mic and ask a good question of this crew. Kristin, I really liked looking at your book because it was again, the title, Keep Marching: How Every Woman Can Take Action and Change Our World. I'm assuming you're not just, that men are welcome as well to change our world. It's looking at the barriers, and particularly the things that women continually face that are barriers to power and justice, but it's also a real practical handbook, a tool book for advocacy. Can you articulate a couple of the top line messages, the things that resonate for you coming out of that in terms of anything you'd want to impart to this sea of advocates here?
Full confession, I had to write a book because I had too much to say, so I'm going to have to condense right now. But I think one of the most important things is to just understand that you don't have to do it all. We have a tremendous amount of tools in our advocacy toolkit. We can make those calls, make those letters to the editor happen, have those meetings. How many of you took action this year lobbying our Congress? How many of you? I know you all are amazing, right? All of you. Thank you. Let's have a round of applause. So the important thing to know is you don't have to do it all. You don't have to do it all at once. That together we truly are tiny drops that make a tsunami of change. And that our democracy isn't about one day, one moment, one bill, or even one Oval Office. It's about our continual engagement, doing what we can every day to make sure that our country really truly reflects the contributions and the needs of all of us. And by all of us, I do mean all of us. And so that is where I think we can make the biggest difference. And people ask about men, can men be involved? This is about women. Well, we like to say anyone with a belly button can be involved. And I love what you said, which was women are more than half the world and we bring the other half in. So in this moment of power together, because we have a tremendous amount of hurdles, there are a tremendous amount of hurdles. Right now, women are making less per hour, our wage, our equality is going down, and moms and women of color are being hit by double, triple, quadruple wage and hiring discrimination. So we have significant problems. But as we face those significant problems, knowing that we're significantly powerful together, I want everyone who is a mom to raise a hand. Now, everyone who has ever at any point in their life had a mother, raise your hand. So the problems are many, the barriers are steep, but all of us together are the change that we need to make the success happen for our whole country and for our families. So thank you.
I guess one last question for Joyce, and then we'll go to, for Her Excellency, and then we'll go to the audience. But just speaking to that, speaking about the sea change that we need to create in the world, as an advocate, I realize that the ask really matters. But the recognition of context, Your Excellency, we've known each other for some years now, and you once told me a story, and you referenced it earlier, about girls eating least and last. And you said this to me, and I've never forgotten it, and there are people in this room that have heard me repeat it, which is that in too many places, the women kill the chicken, pluck the chicken, and cook the chicken, and then feed it to their husband and sons, and they're left with the bones. And so as much as we can advocate for good nutrition programs in countries and other intervention sort of delivery model approaches, we also need to kind of create this sea change to transform gender barriers as well. And I guess, just before we go to the audience, do you have any reflections on that in terms of that sea change that has to happen, because it's not just the specifics, it's the culture?
Yes, indeed, it is the culture. So apart from political will, leaders in Africa must be interested to bring about that change. But I think real change is at community level, mindset change. In town, she can't imagine eating last with her husband. I can't imagine eating last. That's why I had to ask this cook, how did you decide who should have the egg? In the village, I wouldn't ask. But at grassroots, I don't think, it is not that they mean any harm. That's tradition. When the woman cooks food, sometimes in other traditions, like in Malawi, men will eat together. So all the wives are bringing the meal there. So you want to bring there the best. So you leave almost nothing behind. But the boys are eating with the men there. Your daughter is eating with you behind. So you don't mean any harm to this child. It's happening automatically. She's being deprived of that superior diet through the sex that she is, that she's a girl. She's eating with you. So for me, what I have found most effective, even for maternal mortality, it is to recruit advocates that are chiefs. Chiefs in countries where chiefs exist, they are the custodians of tradition and culture. And I have found that when you recruit them and make them feel good and make them feel like champions, and your partner, I called them to State House and told them, I can't succeed without your champions. And for the first time, they were saying, me? Yes, yourself. If any woman dies in your village giving life, it's your fault. So they went back and made their own bylaws. If you deliver in the village, you don't go to the hospital, you pay a fine. Your family pays a fine. So in no time at all, even the little clinics in the villages were congested because every woman had to go to the clinic, but the chief said it. So there are those that can help us change mindset, even around nutrition. When the chief in the community says, it's okay, man, to slaughter a chicken and to eat with your wife, you can even eat together, it begins to have an effect. So that social impact, that social change at grassroots level is what will bring about these habits that persist, that have a negative effect on the girl child.
Thank you. Take off my glasses so I can actually see now at a distance. So we have some folks with some roving mics. I've given you word that it's your turn now. So looking to the audience, who's going to go first? I see some questions. We're going to take 3 in a row, just because I know there'll be lots, if you guys are fine with that, and then we'll just see how they flow in terms of where they're directed or who wants to respond. Please just say your name and where you're from, and then dig into the question. Hi. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Summer 11. I'm from Missouri, St. Louis, and I had a question for Your Excellency. I was wondering, did you ever become discouraged while advocating and leading in Malawi, and how did you overcome that?
I can't hear you.
She wants to, I'll take some.
Did you
wants to
ever
know, did you
become
come
discouraged while advocating and leading in Malawi, and how did you overcome that?
I can repeat the question.
okay.
Go ahead, next. There's one up here.
My name is Kumba Marena. I'm born, brought up from the Gambia in West Africa, and I live in Michigan. I have two questions. One of my questions goes to Her Excellency. I met you in Beijing, I met you in Malawi, and I'm meeting you here the third time, so I'm very, very happy and privileged to meet you again. My question is related to how you relate with women. How did you get them to support you? Because for most of the time, we know that those who sit there, I mean the men, they buy them. And poverty is one of the reasons why they follow them. I remember in the Gambia, we had a referendum. Then I was Minister of Women's Affairs. So I went to the field and I met this group of women and we were discussing over issues. I said, oh, Wednesday I'll come back and we'll continue our meeting. Oh no, Wednesday is the referendum, so I can't meet you. So the president of the group said, no, you have to come or don't come again. And I said, why? He said, they brought us a bag of rice, they gave us money, and they paid our bills, so we're going to vote for them. So we are going to vote and come back. I said, who are them? He said, oh, Mr. So-and-so. I said, what about Mrs. So-and-so? No, she didn't give us anything. It shows that these women who are extremely poor and live in the rural areas, we are just looking for survival, but not their future. And this is why a lot of women suffer in getting into that position, because you don't buy them, you advocate, you sensitize them, and you show them the way forward. But for you, I know that we had used you several times with Salif Johnson and others as a role model. But I'm not too sure how far you have reached other women who are aspiring to be president and share your knowledge, your expertise and experience.
Thank you.
The
That's a
other
great
question,
question.
sorry,
No,
is
I'm
just one, and this is for private sector investment. Women in the rural areas are mostly farmers. 80% of the food we eat in Africa are grown by women. But they are still called subsistence growers. How far do you go in investing in them to move them from subsistence to macro level growers so that they can produce more food, and then the health, the social dimension of development comes in?
Thank you, Kuma. One more question here, I think, and then we'll, oh, okay, one more question over here. Is there a mic?
Hi, I'm Jade Delgado. I'm the only representative from the Philippines, and I'm representing, thank you. I'm representing the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts,
Yes,
as
I
well
love
as
this.
the 2018 Youth Leaders for Nutrition. So my question is, if you amazing ladies could talk more about how you went about working or coordinating with male colleagues from your institutions in order to address different gender issues and to advance gender equality in general in your institutions. Thank you.
Those are great questions. I think we'll go to the panel and everybody keep thinking. So we had a question about how do you manage it when you get discouraged, which I'll just open up to everybody. I think it was directed at Her Excellency, but how do you get past discouragement, because we all face that as advocates? There was a question specifically to you, Your Excellency, about just bringing other women along, I think, that Kuma had to share, and also she had a question about private sector in terms of particularly small subsistence farming. And Joy, I think, from the Philippines, the Girl Guides, did you our best, did you our duty? We all were one at one point. Talking about addressing challenges that might be internal to organizations related to male colleagues, or maybe just masculine sort of dogma related to culture within organizations. Who wants to start? Go ahead.
Yeah, the question was, did you ever get discouraged? I was in the women's movement for 25 years before I became cabinet minister. So it is that period that it sank into Malawians' minds, and particularly my fellow women, that I was a leader. I was moving towards leadership. Although State House was a wild, I didn't even dream that I would become head of state. But discouraged, yes, several times. And unfortunately, as my sister here said, usually it is fellow women that will discourage you. What I have done in the past is to form my own little networks as well that will support me during the times when I'm discouraged. For example, when we were going to Beijing, they agreed, the Malawi delegation, official delegation agreed that Joyce Banda must not go, she has a big mouth. Because I was in the civil society, so I was an advocate. So we talk, because that's what we are about. So they said, no, she can't come to Beijing, we don't know what she will end up saying there. So I had to go to UNFPA, who were funding 12 women from government to go to Beijing, to say I have been removed from the list. So they told me, go back to the ministry. And I went back to the ministry and they said, we have told you you can't come. And at that moment, somebody walked in with a letter to her to say, we will not fund 12 women if Joyce Banda's name is not on the list. So it's for you to lobby, to know how to lobby, to make sure that while you are being discouraged by your fellow women, you are also building this network of men and women that will stand with you and by you. And the time that I became, now I stood with the president, Bingwa Mutharika. We campaigned together. He was looking for the women's vote. We won by 75%. In Malawi, you have to be elected vice president. The constitution is very clear that if he becomes incapacitated or dies midway, you assume office. You call the first meeting. So somebody just whispered to me, because for the longest time I was sidelined, because I refused to endorse his brother. So somebody just whispered to me to say, looks like the president has collapsed. And I said, collapsed? Yeah, well, then somebody is going to come and tell me. It took, fast forward, it took 3 days, 72 hours, for men to accept, for them to accept that I can become head of state. But then I went very quickly to the diplomatic missions in Malawi, mobilized foreign support, and told them that we are heading for a constitutional crisis. It looks like they've already chosen another president. At that moment, they had already identified somebody else, and they were preparing papers to go to court to bar me from taking office. I think it was okay to campaign and become vice president, but to become a president was out of their equation. So anyway, but in the end, what happened is it is the army commander and the international community that intervened and supported me. So yes, discouraged, but I always benefited by very quickly moving and forming my own little networks. But when I became head of state, the day that I became head of state, while they were refusing to swear me in, women, as I said earlier, leadership is a love affair. When you've fallen in love, nobody can break that. People started walking from villages to to parliament, and threatening that if she doesn't take oath today, then we're burning down this parliament. So by the time I was allowed to take oath, it was 5 o'clock in the evening, and I was amazed that people from villages had spent the whole day at parliament waiting until I take oath.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Katja, thank you. Just on the question of being discouraged, any thoughts on that?
Well, it doesn't happen often, but it does. And I have like 3 techniques. One, I think about my grandmother. She was born in 1915. She never got an education. She was really smart. She was really smart, but she brought because she couldn't get an education because her brother had to get it. Then she got my granddad through college by working 7 days a week. Then she got kids, and then it wasn't appropriate for a teacher's wife to get an education or to work. So I think about her, and she's my yardstick that progress is possible. I'm on world stages now, and that's not because of me, it's because of Women Deliver. But we can see change happen. So I think about her and take that long lens. Take the long lens on maternal mortality. Take the long lens on women's rights. So that's one. Never just kind of see it right here, because it's this one we need to look at, because we're in it for the long run. So that's one. The other one is I made sure that I have really good networks. I'm on the road 300 days a year. That can get really lonely. I don't know about you and hotel food, but it's really nice once in a while. But when I'm out and about, so really have those networks that you can call on, whether it's family, whether it's soul sisters, whether it's the brothers, whether kind of that. So have that. And then my last one, that's music. It's amazing how you can change a mood with just putting on the right music, getting that groove in. So that's my 3 little things.
We love music at Results. Julie, did you have a response to the question about private sector and smallholder farmers?
Women from the Philippines. I think keep hiding my. Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. So economic inclusion or financial inclusion is just that, right? Supporting the people from the rural areas, supporting people, bringing the informal sector into the formal sector of the economy of various countries, or for that matter, Africa. What we have done, I can't say we now, I left EcoBank a month ago, but what EcoBank did, or what we did then with economic inclusion, was to set up, or we had already set up, a savings and loan platform, but then we started making more impact and focused on women and farmers in the rural areas, and helping them with small loans, microfinancing, but not only supporting them with the loans, but actually helping them to manage on the ground the work that they were doing. We will bring them into the bank and help them. The Gates Foundation gave us funding for those types of work as well. I know that MasterCard Foundation also spent about $7 million doing exactly that in Africa as well. So economic inclusion is about bringing the informal sector into the formal sector as well. EcoBank now is spending, with their retail banking strategy, is all around financial inclusion. And our mobile app is supporting not just farmers, but I'm not sure people in the room would know, you would know, but the basic mode of transportation in most of our countries is the motorbike. And all these motorbike riders, now it's cashless. They can actually make payment on their cell phones. You get on the back of the motorbike, you drop off. So there's so many things that the financial services sector is now doing, led by EcoBank, in terms of economic inclusion. Before this, just about a couple of years ago, people were hiding the money under their mattresses and it would be stolen because they didn't have the ID to come into the banks to set up banking accounts, but all that has been waived. And we leveraged our presence in 36 countries to actually lobby all the governments to waive that, so that people without IDs, etc., can even come in and open bank accounts. So that's been that. I want to address the question from the lady who is representing the Philippines. I think we as women, this is not about just us. This is about our communities, this is about the future of our economies. From where I sit, we work very, very closely with our male counterparts. The Executive Women's Program that I set up at EcoBank was sponsored by a male executive. Because they think, we think differently, they think logic, and we kind of, again, you hear me saying that walk away from the emotions, because it doesn't work. They lead and sponsor the women executive programs. And because they are the leaders, and I also have the platform of being the executive for corporate affairs, so I put them in front of the camera, and I say, speak to the public, tell them what you have done, right? So we continue to involve them, and with McKinsey as well, I partnered with them. We're also doing advocacy work and helping other organizations as well to bring men to the table. We're all looking for the best for our communities, the best for our companies, the best for the future of our countries. It's not just a women's issue. It's a community issue that we're tackling.
Excellent. I think we have time for 2 very short questions, not statements, if there are any. So 2 very short questions, and then we're going to wrap with some closing thoughts One here and then one there, and that's it.
Thank you. And my question is for Your Excellency Joyce Banda. As a young woman who want to run for office in the future, what are some ways that you have practiced self-care?
Self-care. Good question. Self-care. How have you taken care of yourself as you've been getting ready to lead others? That's important. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Princess Kasune. I'm a young member of parliament for Zambia and have been an advocate in HIV and AIDS and living with HIV for the past 20 years. My question is, how do we as young parliamentarians or politicians incoming support other young women so that we don't lose that space in politics and leadership?
Your Excellency, I think those are both questions for you, and then we'll... So one is about, and actually this is for anybody on the panel, how do we take care of ourselves even as we work hard to change the world? It's important. Music is one way. What else? And second, how do you support young women to enter into politics, to become politicians, to kind of break through that glass ceiling, as Kristin was alluding to earlier, in a real way this time?
Yeah, I have found that there's so much pain because there's so much abuse for women who try to aspire to get into elected office. So you can be consumed with anger because, and I say this because of what the media is doing now, the scandalization, the smear campaign, the lies. In one African country that shall remain anonymous, women were being stripped the last election. They start trying to campaign, which for me is discouraging other women from entering politics. But what do you do? What do you do yourself is to ensure that you don't allow that to sit in you. You don't allow to be wounded by that. You don't allow to get discouraged by that. It took me a long time. The reason why I'm talking about it, it took me a long time to accept that you can just abuse me and I don't fight back. But you know, you find yourself that sometimes, even you during your last elections, some of the things that were written about a woman candidate and a male candidate and the difference, and then you could see that she must be helpless. There's nothing she can do. So for you to be able to take that and not react, or to have a special team that will respond on your behalf, it's not enough, but it's very painful indeed. So for you is to have that free mind, to let things come and go, and not to dwell on issues that hurt you, because it can really affect your health. I don't know if I responded to that question. Yeah, because you said, how do you look after yourself? It's to make sure that you find those hurdles and those roadblocks and find a way. Instead of sitting there negotiating for somebody to open that roadblock for you, just use an alternative route. That's what I mean.
Thank you. We're nearing the end here, and I just have one last request of our panel. So in a little more than a tweet, but less than a paragraph, which is now modern lexicon for, what's your advice for the hundreds of amazing, powerful, gorgeous advocates in this room to arm them, to inspire them as they head into the future, committed to creating a better world? Katja?
All right. So I have a message, a tweet, and an ad, and I'll be fast.
Okay.
So we need a gender lens to everything we do. And that's kind of my main message. Whatever you do, whatever you advocate for, remember that gender lens. And the tweet is, when you invest in girls and women, everybody wins. Hashtag voices for results, hashtag WD 2019. And that's my ad. See you in Vancouver at the Women Deliver Conference, together with thousands and thousands and thousands of gender advocates from across the globe.
It was a paragraph, but it was a good paragraph. Julie?
I'm so glad you asked that question because before I got on the stage, I was going to tell these beautiful people here who are doing amazing work that advocacy is the key to unlocking closed minds. More than ever, your voice, the voice that you have, is the leverage that will unlock the change that is so needed for the transformation of this amazing globe that we all live in. So well done, and please continue the work. I want to be part of you. I want to take you to Africa, please.
Kristin?
Okay. Gender justice, racial justice, and economic justice are intertwined, and we won't stop fighting, we won't stop marching until everyone has a chance to thrive. Hashtag Voices for Results. And I just want to thank everybody for everything that you do and for being the results that inspire everybody to keep fighting.
Your Excellency, thank you,
In my
Kristin.
final results, I will just attempt to respond to the question that said, how did you get fellow women to support you? I feel that in my case, because all my adult life, I have worked on issues of women and girls. I started when I was very young. I was 31 when I started providing microfinance to my fellow women. I went to Grameen Bank, and when I came back, I went to India, Ella Bhatti's place, Self-Employed Women's Association of India. When I came back to Malawi, designed our own model, and by 1997, we had provided microfinance to 50,000 women, and received the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger with President Chissano of Mozambique. Number two, I established the Joyce Banda Foundation, and my aim was to send as many girls as possible to school, and that's why I said earlier that we have provided school fees and educated 6,500 girls in Malawi under the Joyce Banda Foundation. And then I have been fighting for maternal mortality. So I feel that in my case, because I've focused on issues of women, I have won the hearts of women in my country, and that's how I got support from the women of my country. And so, I mean, I didn't know how much I have benefited. They have benefited more than me, because the moment I landed back in Malawi after 4 years, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of people at the airport. And what I heard again and again is the president of the poor is back. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so very much for your brilliant questions. We're right on time. And I would just repeat something that I heard from a very, very, very wise woman once. We should all, as advocates, work hard, change the world, and have some fun while we do it. So let's take on the world. Thank you, everybody, very much.